Subukan natin dito sa baka may bisugo. Tagal makita. Dahil bihira ng isda ba? Marami rin mga mamimisugo dito.
Here, in Zambales, Philippines, Efren Purones has made his living from the seas for the last 5 decades.
Doon ang papuntang Scarborough. 260 degree. Doon sure full ang tira mo doon. Doon kahit nakapundo ka, sigurado may dadawi. Dito paanod-anod na nga. Wala man. Putik.
There's a reason Efren no longer ventures into the waters of the Scarborough shore, some 200 kilometers away, despite the promise of a bountiful catch.
Ito, nagwawater cannon yan eh. Pinagtulungan nila yung dalawa silang barko, pinagtulungan nila yan ay yan ang namigay ng diesel. Yang bipar na yan. Ayun, Chinese Coast Guard, ang laki. Oo, yan dalawa. Nahirapan kami ngayon hindi kami makapasok ng Scarborough talaga sa looban ng Scarborough.
The Scarborough Shoal and the Spratly Islands to the southwest are in a disputed area of the South China Sea, part of which is called the West Philippine Sea by the Filipinos. These islands lie within the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. According to the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, the exclusive economic zone is an area of up to 200 nautical miles from a country's landmass, which it can legally exploit. Meanwhile, China claims a large swath of the South China Sea, bounded by what it called the 9, now 10, dash line, including much of the Philippines' EEZ.
So the main strategy by which China attempts to deny us access to our waters in the South China Sea is by maintaining a presence there in order to physically block but also deter fishing efforts and offshore oil and gas survey efforts by the Philippines.
In the last year and a half, clashes between the vessels of these two nations have become more frequent in these waters, culminating in perhaps the tensest confrontation yet. On June 17th, Chinese sailors, armed with knives and sticks, clashed with Filipino personnel.
And it started because President Marcos Jr. started to pivot away from the non-confrontational policy of Duterte. China also ramped up its response, and increasingly those responses have become more and more violent, culminating in this unfortunate incident in which a Philippine Coast Guard officer had his thumb cut off. This is the first time in many years that there has been physical injury that arose from the clash.
In the backdrop of the conflict between China and the Philippines, there is another feud brewing. A quarrel that could shape how Manila deals with its standoff with Beijing. Bad blood is bubbling between the Philippines President, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., and his predecessor, Rodrigo Duterte. Early signs of a rift could be seen when Marcos Jr. deviated from Duterte's approach to China.
So, the Duterte administration was famous in its foreign policy for accommodating China most of the time. There was an expectation during the elections that Marcos Jr. is, as the anointed successor of President Duterte, that Marcos Jr. is going to continue the foreign policy of Duterte. But that did not happen.
Ang West Philippine Sea ay hindi katang-isip natin lamang. Ito ay atin.
What we saw instead is that Marcos Jr. pursued a harder foreign policy, which meant that Marcos Jr. was more assertive in defending the Philippines' rightful maritime claims in the West Philippine Sea.
Yet, Rodrigo Duterte, who was president from 2016 to 2022, was not always so accommodating with Beijing. While he was campaigning for the presidency, Duterte promised to stake the Filipino claim on the disputed atolls.
Kahit na nagsimula siya sa kanyang campaign noong 2015, nasabi niya, sasakay siya ng jet ski at ilalagay niya yung bandera ng Pilipinas doon sa mga artificial islands ng China. Mukhang isang pan lang yung campaign peg.
Kaya binoto namin, kay sinabi niya, yung Scarborough, mag-jet ski pa ako, di ba sinabi niya? Yung sinabi niya, ayusin niya yung gusto diyan sa Scarborough. Kaya yung ang dami namin bumoto sa kanya.
But after coming to power, President Duterte would switch tact, going so far as setting aside a 2016 Hague Tribunal arbitration decision that China's claims had no legal foundation pursuant to UNCLOS. China has rejected the Hague ruling.
Na half-jokingly, ang sabi niya ay, ano bang masama kung tayo maging probinsya ng China? Half-jokingly, galing yung kay Digong. At sabi ni Digong, nung nanalo tayo sa UNCLOS noong 2016, ay isang pirasong papel lang yan na dapat itapon sa basura.
So, yung ano talaga niya, no, yung kanyang talagang focus is independent foreign policy. No? So, sabi niya na yung kanyang usual term na friends to all, enemies to none, yeah, there is this decision by the tribunal, pero who will implement it? No? So, sabi niya, no, if we cannot do this na tried conflict situation, why not befriending China in the hope, no, that they will have they will also respond, no?
China actually lifted some restrictions on Filipino fishing during Duterte's term. Nonetheless, his courting of Beijing left some fishermen here in Zambales with bias, or rather, voters' remorse.
Wala, nagsisi nga ako binoto ko siya. Wala pala. China palang kuha niya. Ako, bisita ko sa China talaga. Pinahirapan kami dyan sa Scarborough. Dami ng karanasan na kuha dyan.
Huwag naman sana ganon dahil kami mga Pilipino tayo. Huwag naman siya kakampi doon sa mga kalaban na mga, lalo na sa aming mga mabababa.
When Duterte's term was up, his camp would form an alliance with the Marcoses in the 2022 presidential election. Rodrigo Duterte's daughter, Sara Duterte, ran to be Ferdinand Marcos's vice president. Dubbed the Uni Team, the Marcos-Duterte tandem won in a landslide. But soon after his inauguration, President Marcos Jr. took a different path from his predecessor.
At nung kanyang trip sa China, yung kanyang first state visit sa China na nangyari, ay mukhang hindi siya masaya. Dahil yung binigay sa kanya ng China na listahan ng posibleng tulong na $22 billion ay parang rehash lang nung commitment ng China kay Digong na walang na-deliver. Kaya doon na nagsimula yung medyo official pivot away from China from the Duterte foreign policy. Diyan nagsimula. At binabanatan siya ng mga Duterte doon dahil nga iba yung foreign policy ng mga Duterte.
One move by the Marcos administration was to actively assert Filipino claims in the disputed sea. The Filipino leader also beefed up the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with America, allowing U.S. troops access to more facilities in the Philippines. Then, he would also expand joint military exercises with the U.S. and its allies, with this year's Balikatan War Games being the largest yet. All to China's chagrin.
菲方应该清醒地认识到，拉拢域外国家在南海炫耀武力、挑动对抗，只会加剧局势紧张，破坏地区稳定。
Reactive yung China. So you notice if there are mga untoward incidents, no, in the West Philippine Sea, which China initiated, it's usually after We have other activities with other countries. So kung ganun na, kasi biglang from pivot to China, biglang 180 degree pivot to US kaagad. So syempre nagulat din yung China. So parang nasaan na yung pinagsamahan natin for the past 6 years? Biglang nawala kaagad.
But what China does not seem to understand is that the Philippines is going to the US precisely because of the insecurity that China is causing.
Duterte would come out against his successor's actions. In an interview with Chinese state media, the former president implied that Marcos Jr. was an American stooge, that it is the Americans that will tell him what he should say to China.
Marcos has practically outsourced our defense and foreign policies to the United States. And at the same time, we have a former president that is using the closeness of Marcos to the United States in order to discredit him. Not because of national interest, but because of dynastic interest.
But as far as the fishermen are concerned, they prefer Marcos's more muscular approach.
Kung ganito katagal sa Escalboro, marami nang nakuha. Ilang oras to. Dito, sa tabi. Si Marcos talaga sa Pilipino. Si Duterte kampi sa China, kaya doon ako na walang gana. Kahit kababayan ko, wala na akong gana.
At the heart of the Marcos-Duterte feud is a political power play. And a recent move by the vice president could be a declaration of war. July 22nd, 2024, typhoon season has brought torrential rains to Quezon City, Philippines. Inside the Batasang Pambansa complex, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is about to deliver his third State of the Nation address, or SONA. Outside, the deluge did not dampen the enthusiasm of the gathered Marcos supporters.
Dito kami para suportahan ang SONA ng ating Pangulong Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. para sa kanyang SONA.
Tapos namimigay po siya sa mga mahirap sa bigas, ganon. Tapos sa 10K yung pera. Basta gustong-gusto ko po yung kanyang sana po ipagpatuloy po natin.
Magaganda po yung kanyang mga ginagawa. Tapos yung isa pong yung mababa ang bigas sa kadiwa.
Number 1, pinaglalaban talaga natin yung West Philippine Sea na magiging atin talaga. Hindi na, alam mo, atin yan eh. Hindi natin pwedeng ibibigay kahit kanino yan.
Yet, there's one prominent absentee at this year's SONA, Vice President Sara Duterte. She had earlier announced that she would skip this speech as the self-proclaimed designated survivor. A designated survivor is typically someone from the cabinet who is absent from political gatherings, so that in the event the president and top elected officials are harmed, he or she can assume power. The vice president, however, has no authority to appoint herself the designated survivor. Instead, observers say Sara Duterte's absence is political.
I was not surprised that she would not attend because, after all, if you've just made a very public split, leaving the cabinet of the president, it would be very strange for you to appear in the zona.
In fact, I would understand na hindi siya umattend. Remember, wala naman siyang hawak na microphone, so if ever na she will be attacked by the president, diba? So she cannot defend herself.
Why would President Marcos Jr. attack his deputy, his erstwhile uni-team partner? Well, 1 month before SONA, on June 19th, the vice president quit her cabinet position as the education secretary, the clearest sign yet that she has split from the Marcos camp.
It's untenable because a cabinet member is supposed to be the alter ego of the Philippine president. And if it is obvious that a cabinet member is no longer a part of the president's team, then his or her place in the cabinet would be very difficult.
To understand the rift, we have to go back to 2022. President Rodrigo Duterte was about to end his term in office, and campaign season is underway for the country's next leader.
Well, nung 2022, no? Nung 2021 ay sa mga surveys ay number 1 si Sara Duterte at 27%, 27-28. Tapos si Bongbong Marcos was 20%, Isko Moreno was 19%. So ganun yung top 3. At si Sara ay kinukumbinsi ng kanyang tatay na tumakbo as president with Bongo as vice president. At definitely ayaw niya kay Bongo as vice president, mas malalim yung away nila, ay may nag-negotiate na baka pwede na tumakbo na lang siya as vice president ng BBM. So after the filing, until dun sa deadline for substitution, no October or November, ay nag-negotiate si former President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo at si Amy Marcos na si Sara ay mag-vice kay BBM. At na-clinch naman yon. Kaya by December, unstoppable na sila, yung unity team na yan.
My sense is that some of her advisors thought that it would be best for her to be with Marcos, mainly because Sara Duterte lacked experience in the executive at the national level, and so that would adequately prepare her if she runs for the presidency in 2028. And in fact, her father was not shy in saying that he was disappointed with his daughter's decision to run or to give way to Marcos Jr. to run for president, and she will just run for the vice presidency.
In the Philippines, the president and the vice president are elected separately instead of a single ticket like in the United States. In 2022, as a result of the Uni-Team alliance, both Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte won their contest handedly. Though many observers did not expect this political partnership to last.
I wrote an article that basically said that this alliance between two dynasties is not going to last. At the most, it's going to last about a year and a half, because in the Philippine context, historically, electoral alliances between dynasties have been alliances of convenience.
I guess the first sign of friction was when she was not given the defense cabinet portfolio.
Dahil ang gusto ni Sara, defense portfolio. Yun yung marites nun. At ang nakuha niya ay DepEd. Kung ikaw naman ay presidente, ba't mo ibibigay yung defense portfolio sa iyong vice president? Ibig sabihin, yung hahawak ng military, yung vice president po, baka delikado ka naman, no? Dahil literally, the vice presidency is a heartbeat away from the presidency.
Soon, the families would quarrel over another matter. President Marcos proposed a constitutional change in December 2023 to amend the country's foreign ownership laws. Currently, public utilities must be Filipino-owned. There are also caps on foreign control in sectors like education and advertising.
They want to liberalize or kind of relax the constitutional provisions that prevent certain foreign companies from investing in the Philippines. The argument is that the Philippines lags behind foreign direct investment compared to other ASEAN countries, mainly because of this constitutional provision. Some people are worried that there is nothing that can prevent those who will change the constitution from also changing the political provisions in the constitution, which can actually extend the terms of the current politicians. So that would be a game changer. So they wouldn't want that.
In Filipino history, a constitution change has previously been used to concentrate power in the head of state. In 1973, by the current president's father, Ferdinand Marcos Sr.
Well, the Constitution was amended to make the Philippines a parliamentary system. It was promoted as a democratic constitution, but of course, the important thing was, informally speaking, it was a greater concentration of power on his part.
The constitutional amendment divided power between the president and the prime minister, similar to the French system. But having declared martial law in 1972, Marcos Sr. effectively held both offices and all associated powers.
It was one of Marcos's ways of trying to hide the fact that in 1972 he had established a dictatorship.
In the present, Rodrigo Duterte was initially critical of any constitutional amendment.
I think what he's really afraid of is that Sara won't be able to run for president in 2028, and the one who would be favored most by this is Martin Romualdez, who, as a Speaker of the House, would be the key person within one House parliamentary system.
Martin Romualdez is the current Speaker of the House and President Marcos's cousin and close ally.
If it becomes a parliamentary system where the current Speaker of the House becomes the Prime Minister, then that will suit very much desires or the interests of the Marcos dynasty.
After the amendment proposal, the Duterte camp would ramp up their attacks on President Marcos Jr., while Sara Duterte largely kept out of the fray. Her brothers and her father would take their gloves off.
The armed forces of the Philippines, alam ninyo, may drug addict tayo na presidente. Sabi nila, pinapagpatay ko raw yung mga drug user at drug addict. Mabutit na lang, wala na ako sa pwesto, baka kasali ka pa.
Sa tagal ko sa politika, ngayon lang ako nakakita ng isang ex-president na lahat ng threats na pwede mong hugutin sa sako ay binato mo sa isang incumbent president. Ano yung kanyang threats? Sedition, people power, uprising, mutiny, coup d'etat, no? Secession, even a hint of assassination.
Until recently, both President Marcos Jr. and Vice President Duterte have maintained some distance from the conflict. But things could now change.
Umalis lang yan sa kabinete kasi may plano yan, di ba? Diba? Kasi before, hindi siya pwede mag-criticize because, she's part of the administration. Right now, she has a free hand to criticize the administration, to entice supporters, entice people to align with them.
Are you for me or against me? I think there will be, people will be forced to declare their allegiances, whether they're for the Marcoses or for the Dutertes.
Outside the venue of the State of the Nation address, the supporters are drawing battle lines.
Kanina po muntik po ako makakita po ng kaaway kasi mismong kasabayan ko po, nakasabayan ko, nagsisigaw po kami BBM, sigaw naman niya Duterte. Sabi ko, wag ka rito, kalaban ka pala wag ka dito. Sabi ko, wag kang ganyan, dapat hindi ka sumasabay ka dito.
Will the tiff between two of the Philippines' most powerful families divide ordinary Filipinos? And what role does superpower rivalry play in this? Byron Cristobal made a name for himself as the manager of a female music group. But online, he's better known by his moniker Banat Bay, where the vlogger is a fervent Duterte supporter.
Naku, patay, alam mo, nung binasya ko to, Noong 2017, iba, nagpasalamat pa si Pangulong Marcos kay Duterte. Tapos noong 2024, biglang wala nang nagawa. Noong 2017, hindi pa pala presidente si Marcos noon. 2022 pala siya tumakbo. So, kailangan niya pa yung suporta ni Duterte. Iba talaga ito si Mayor pa nun, Rodrigo Duterte, na hindi peke. Kasi lahat naman ng politiko, di ba, sasabihin nila may malasakit sila. Ito kasi hindi talaga eh. Pagka merong naaapi, talagang inaano niya, tinutulungan niya.
With the fissure between the Marcos and Duterte camps, Banat-Bay has become increasingly critical of the president.
Ako sa tingin ko, ito ang simula ng pagbagsak ng administrasyon na to. Kasi kung titingnan nyo naman ang ratings ng mga Duterte compare sa Marcos, malayo. From the 2021, doon pa lang, ang layo na ni VP Sara compare kay Marcos.
Di ba ninyo na sa isip ninyo?
As one of Duterte's most outspoken supporters, Banat-Bay receives his fair share of hate.
Vlogger na walang kwenta, pero pinanonood mo. Tanga ka din, ano? Ayun. Noong una, yung namatay si Percy Lapid, ikaw na susunod, yung mga ganun. Marami akong ganun, mga ikaw na susunod, ang ingay ng bunganga mo, pag nakita kita, sasapakin kita.
But he himself is not without controversy. There are online petitions to shut Banat-Bay's social pages for spreading misinformation. And he's currently being sued for libel by a former senator. The vlogger, however, is defiant.
Pagka may sarili ka ng paniniwala, lahat na lang ng ibang tao mali. So, yan ang sinasabi nila. Pero kami, stick facts lang kami.
Filipinos have some of the highest usage of social media in Southeast Asia, and it is their main outlet to keep up to date. About 6 in 10 use Facebook for news. The problem, though, is the online space in the Philippines is notoriously toxic. It was once dubbed Patient Zero in the fake news epidemic.
Siguro for me, nung nagsimulang gawing super idol or Panginoon ng mga tao yung isang politiko, which was started nung time ni President Duterte, former President Duterte, hindi na naging bukas sa kritisismo yung mga tao. Konting kibot lang, konting sabi lang about the politician na sinusuportahan nila, galit na sila, kumbaga nawala na ng diskurso. So, yun yung, kaya naging toxic yung politika.
Julie is a reporter with One News, assigned to cover the president. In the last decade, Filipino journalists like her have been on the receiving end of brutal harassment. The Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility recorded 75 cases of attacks and threats against journalists between June 2022 and April 2023.
If I remember correctly, merong isang coverage ako sa Bicol na, well, mas kaunti yung tao doon sa motorcade, doon sa political rally ni PBBM. So, of course, yun yung nireport ko na hindi kasing dami ng tao from the previous place na pinuntahan niya. And then natulog lang ako. Kumbaga natulog ka lang. Kinabukasan, ang dami ng hate messages. Yung kumbaga double standard, na kapag gusto nila yung sinasabi mo, gusto ka nila. Pag against them, fake news ka.
The worry is, if the feud between the president and the Dutertes intensifies, how will it divide Filipinos?
Our politics tend to gravitate toward personality politics rather than political parties. So it's very easy to be polarized because the degree of polarization depends upon the number of key personalities there are.
In late January, former President Duterte poured fuel on the fire. He suggested that the region of Mindanao should secede from the Philippines. The majority of Filipino Muslims live in Mindanao. It is a fraught region where rebels once fought the government for independence decades prior. One part of it, known as Bangsamoro, is in talks with the government for autonomy. Mindanao's biggest city is Davao City, a Duterte stronghold. Rodrigo Duterte's youngest son, Sebastian, is the city's mayor, a post his sister and father previously held. Why did Rodrigo Duterte make such an incendiary remark like secession?
So that statement was, again, trying to test the waters, try to activate the mass-based support. Siyempre, pag namin, Mindanao will separate, kasi we have been neglected. We can do it on our own. Mayaman tayo. We are the food basket of the Philippines. Magugutom ang buong Pilipinas pag nawala ang Mindanao. So parang tinest lang yun. But, it did not get that much support. I guess a lot of people already know that that would be impossible.
The Philippines' National Security Advisor, Eduardo Año, would respond, saying that any attempt to secede will be met by the government with resolute force. In Mindanao, Duterte's call gained little traction. Leaders of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, who are negotiating a Bangsa-Moro autonomy deal with the federal government, were quick to reject the idea of secession.
It's not an option. Well, we respect the view of the former president, but I don't think it does not change anything.
But elsewhere, something curious happened.
那像这一则贴文，其实它的时间是在今年的2月9号，那是在微博这个平台上出现的。那他在这个账号的贴文就是说，杜特地已经举起这个独立的大旗，然后军队已经选边站了，然后菲律宾在爆发内战的边缘，而且这样的内战可能会影响到南中国海的局势。
Qing Yang works for Doublethink Lab, a research agency based in Taiwan. After Duterte's remarks, they began to notice posts about an imminent Filipino civil war circulating on Chinese social media.
这一篇的文章，它是在飞华网，就是说有点像是在提供菲律宾华人的讯息。那他这边下的标题就是说，如果马可仕总统在为美国服务的话，那缅南老岛就要退出菲律宾。这样的一个言论可能会去影响到菲律宾的群众对于他们的外交政策的一些支持，比如说中国可能会在内政议题上去扩大他们的内部冲突，然后会去引导像这样内部的冲突到于对外政策这样。我觉得这个领域其实是值得注意的，但是我目前还没办法说它是一个在很严重的状况。
Doublethink Lab also found that some Philippine influencers were parroting the Chinese narratives.
他们可能是比较偏向网红，然后我们去观察他的社群媒体账号的时候，他可能有看到一些例子，是他可能会参加一些中国外交部办的活动，然后平常他的粉专或者是脸书的页面上比较多的，也是倾向中国的一个比较有利的一个趋势在这边。
parang lumalabas nito, it's a proxy war din, Parang Marcos US, Duterte China, So parang ganun yung nakikita kong laro eh. So ako, sabi ko it would really depend on how China would try to play with the situation.
And when details emerged that Rodrigo Duterte, as president, had entered a secret agreement with China to maintain the status quo in the South China Sea, the former president was labeled a traitor in public and online. His supporters were also tarred with the same brush.
Sa tingin ko, oo. Kasi una-una, ito'y laban ng China at ng Amerika na ang pinaglalabanan ay Taiwan. Kaya ngayon sinasabi nila na pinagbibintangan nila na yung mga Duterte supporter is pro-China. Hindi kami pro-China. Pro-Philippines kami. We want to protect the Filipinos. Kaya nga ayaw namin na magkaroon ng gulo dyan.
As the feud turns bitter, the war of words between the two camps is likely to ratchet up, potentially dividing supporters on the issues in the South China Sea.
For the first time, nakakaroon tayo ng isang bagong emerging patriotism. Sa lahat ng survey, more than 90% ng ating populasyon, more than 90% ng na-survey, ang sinasabi ay galit sila sa China sa pangpasok sa ating bakuran. Kaya sa mamamayan ay na-unite. Sa mga politiko, nahahati dahil iba yung kanilang interest.
Kung open yung lahat sa discourse, kung open yung lahat na maayos tayo mag-uusap, maayos tayo magpapaliwanag, hindi magiging toxic yung politics natin. Hindi, lalo na sa social media, hindi magiging toxic kung pakikinggan mo ano ba yung ipinupunto ng isa.
The last thing that we need right now is a country where politicians are warring or quarreling because we have an external threat.
In this political contest, who wins could impact how the country deals with its many challenges.
In our international relations, we have faced challenges to our territorial sovereignty, and we will assert our rights and interests in the same fair and pacific way that we have always done.
This year's SONA was the first time that the West Philippine Sea was mentioned in a State of a Nation address by President Marcos.
Ang West Philippine Sea.
After this SONA, we see a clear break both in actions and in words of the Marcos Jr. administration from the Duterte administration.
Sabi nga natin, itong pagre-resign lang is just the start. No? Start pa lang siya, no? So, ibig sabihin na, okay, we have drawn the lines. Yun na, drawing of lines pa lang yan. So, pag nag-drawing of lines na, syempre, kukuha na from drawing of lines, you will go na sa recruitment of your allies. So, syempre, no, pag nag-recruit na, so divided na kayo, yun na, no, magbabatuhan na yan.
On the horizon is a contest where the conflict could play out. The 2025 midterm elections. Former President Duterte and two of his sons have hinted at a run for the Senate.
Sara Duterte will have her own set of candidates. Marcos Jr. will have his own set of candidates, and then the real opposition will also have its own set of candidates. Especially the Senate, it's going to be a popularity contest.
Well, kung mananalo ang mga Duterte, so ang ibig sabihin nun mananaig yung mga Duterte sa Senado, no, kasama nung kanilang mga kakampi. Dahil nga, syempre yung alimbawa yung mga legislative agenda ni President Marcos Jr. ay syempre hindi kokontrahin na nila, 'di ba? So, yun. Pero maganda ring magkakataon dahil siyempre kung makakapasok yung mga oposisyon, makakapasok yung talagang masasabi natin na may mga record sa Kongreso at Senado na pwede namang maipagmalaki.
The faction that wins the midterms will have the momentum going into the 2028 presidential elections.
Clearly, the Marcoses are preparing for Sara Duterte's running in 2028, and the Dutertes are also, preparing for that. What's going to happen with this feud between these two families that has now passed from the level of what you might call verbal kind of exchanges, and it has now moved into open warfare. It's now political war between these two families.
In terms of approval, rating, and trust, Vice President Duterte has consistently polled higher than President Marcos. Though, since the split, the gap has narrowed, at least in one poll.
Yung trend niya pababa. Halimbawa, ito yung first time na mas malaki ang binaba ni Sara kesa kay BBM. Dahil last year, pareho silang bumababa at mas malaki si BBM. This year, ang bumababa na mas malaki ay si Sara. Mas ang problema ni BBM, mas bumababa siya sa survey dahil sa mga gut issues like food inflation.
The Filipino economy grew the fastest in ASEAN last year at 5.6%, though inflation has darkened the economic highlights. While it is down from the peak of 2023, general headline inflation climbed in 2024 to 4.4% in July. Food inflation is slightly higher, above 6%. Furthermore, foreign investment remains comparatively low. In 2023, the Philippines ranked 6th among the 10 ASEAN countries in terms of foreign direct investment inflows.
We are in a very competitive environment and a very competitive area known as Southeast Asia. Everybody is looking for investments. So we have a few challenges ahead of us, considering our power energy cost is one of the highest in the region compared to our neighbors. And these are things that we have to upgrade. And also the big challenge of ease of doing business.
Here, too, the feud could have an impact.
This feud between the Dutertes and Marcoses, it might lead to a period of political instability in the Philippines, no, which might spook away potential investment. I think what spooked investors and as well as our diplomatic partners, how quickly policies can change between administrations. The primary worry is that what if Sara Duterte wins the 2028 elections? No? If she wins that elections, no, we are going to expect that she's going to undo the policies of Marcos.
With the Marcos administration's pivot to America, Washington has pledged over $1 billion to invest in the Philippines' semiconductor sector.
Friendly relations with any country is favorable for us. Any country. Of course, for certain benefits, some countries will go out of their way to help you. But they will help you as long as it will benefit them. They will not help you to the detriment of their own interests. That's politics. And businessmen are not afraid of politics. We try as much as possible to learn and to work with politics.
Besides the Philippines' midterms, all eyes will be on another election as we head into 2025, the vote for the next US president.
So wala tayong problema if it's still, if now kasi ang nilalabas nila is si Harris eh. So kung si Harris yung mananalo, we don't have any problems, no? Because our perception is that it will continue whatever is the program provided to us. But if it's Trump, then that's another story. If Trump perceive that their presence in the Philippines will only cost them money and they will not gain anything, I don't think they will continue whatever promises the Democrat administration promised us. So, tapos tayo, wala na. No? And, pwede pang gamitin ng mga Duterte yan on their favor. Sige. No? So, sinabi ko kasi sa inyo, di ba? Dapat kaibigan natin China. So, we were correct. Di ba? We were right. All that, from the very start. So, since nagkamali itong administration, dapat ibalik natin yung tama.
Already, things are getting ugly. Vice President Sara Duterte accused the authorities of reducing her security detail, while her brother, Davao Mayor Sebastian Duterte, alleged that the federal government is delaying funds for projects in Davao. The administration denies that these moves are politically motivated. Meanwhile, President Marcos has been coy about allowing the International Criminal Court to investigate the extrajudicial killings of his predecessor's drug war.
One of the biggest cards they play is the ICC, the International Criminal Court investigation. So that's a very big sword of Damocles on former President Duterte.
So, yun. So habang pumapasok, no, you destroy the reputation of our justice system, and for all we know, lampas na yung 2028 and Digong is still under investigation. 'Di ba? So hindi natupad yung objective mo.
These salvos in the Marcos-Duterte feud could be a sign of things to come, all with perhaps an impact on both domestic and foreign policy.
Dahil nangyayari itong dynamics na ito sa shadow ng great game, the game of the superpowers. Hindi sila papayag na yung kanilang mga sinusuportahan ay madurog.
This is the problem at this point, that the United States is taking advantage of the image of China as a bully in order to fortify its offensive capabilities in the Philippines. And that's really a tragedy, and we need to do something about it.
My biggest concern is that because of the split people are made to believe that there are only two choices, Marcos and Duterte. And that's sad and unfortunate thing if that happens. Because I believe that there are a lot of deserving politicians out there who can also run and hopefully win public office, because the Philippines is at the cusp of change. We're trying to revitalize our economy, to quell a country who is encroaching on our territory. So our politicians should get their acts together.